So yeah, thanks to all of you for taking the time during your meeting to discuss this, because I realize that some of you might be thinking this does not merit attention because it's so far away, because we're looking to release this AO in October 2022. But I want to start the discussion early, because our typical practice of releasing a draft AO a year before the final AO goes out means that there's not enough time to really consider everything, for you all to consider your feedback, for NASA to consider what you tell us, and for us then to close the loop with you and explain to you why we did what we did. So that's why we're getting an early start. And I should start with a caveat here that while there is a Q&A after this, it is not my intent to be able to answer your questions today. My intent is to hear what you have to say, and then ultimately use that to inform the discussions we have at headquarters over the next couple months, and then get back to you and the rest of the community in the March or so time frame at a town hall, and give the final parameters for the major AO policies and the rationale behind them. And then the other parameters we'll of course keep discussing as we build up to the draft AO this fall. So just I want to make sure that nobody gets upset when I can't tell you in 10 minutes, here's what the cost cap is. The point today is to get you guys thinking what the cost cap should be and provide that to NASA. The other thing I want to say is, and I've had this discussion with a lot of ags, I'm also here because I want to help you make your feedback the most effective it can be. And what I mean by that is sending feedback saying you should increase the cost cap to $4 trillion might meet your needs, but it's not going to happen because we don't have $4 trillion. So I'd like to make myself available to you to give you early feedback on what is reasonable, what you can expect, and how to present your feedback in a way that will have the most impact, the most persuasive impact on NASA headquarters. So I'm very open to that discussion. So as I mentioned before, we are working toward that AO release, final AO release in October 2022, which means a draft AO in October 2021. We're starting early because we want increased collaboration. We want increased discussion as we lead up to that. What we also want to do is follow what has now become standard practice in planetary, which is for Discovery and New Frontiers both to release the significant AO parameters, like cost cap, like launch readiness date and other things, as early as possible, because any one of these parameters can torpedo the feasibility of any given mission concept. So it's in everybody's best interest for NASA to let you know what we're thinking along those terms as early as we can, because I want to avoid the nightmare scenario of everybody working on a mission proposal. And I know that there are teams out there, because we selected New Frontiers 4 in July of 2019, and in August of 2019, I started getting questions about New Frontiers 5. I do not want anybody to be in a situation where they put in 2 years worth of work and then see the final AO come out and realize that their mission's not on the mission list, or the cost cap is $200 million lower than what their mission needs, and have all that work go to waste. So those are the overriding goals for this effort. This is the engagement plan. I think the key date here is that on February 19th, that feedback from the community, from all the ags, from any interested parties are due to me. And I've had the question asked, how do we give this formal feedback to NASA? You email it to me. Don't overthink this, everybody. Just send me an email. And then what we will do is crunch that inside of NASA headquarters, discuss it at various levels. And then our plan is to come back to the community sometime in late March. It says here a town hall at LPSC, but I think given that LPSC is virtual, we'll just have this town hall as a standalone town hall after LPSC in late March, early April, and let everybody know what those major parameters are going to be and why we picked those. So I have a few slides here that march through every major parameter just to sort of prompt discussion. So feel free to start filling the chat box. I will go through these quickly in the interest of time, because again, the point here is discussion, not just for me to read slides to you. The list of mission themes, I think, is probably one of the more popular topics. Just as a reminder, and I feel very strongly about this, New Frontiers does not dictate the mission architecture, just the science objectives for each of these mission themes. So if the decadal survey said that the mission had to look like X, that doesn't matter to NASA. All we care about are that you are meeting a preponderance of the science objectives. We asked CAPS to recently weigh in on this as well, and given their feedback, which we placed great weight in, what we put forward to the community in the October announcement was the list that you see here. And I think and this tracks very closely with what the decadal survey recommended. Some caveats based on CAPS feedback is that IO Observer would come off this list if it were selected as part of the discovery process that's coming to a conclusion now. Ocean Worlds is only going to cover Enceladus, not Titan, because of the Dragonfly selection. And we also have a comment in here that the South Pole Aiken Basin sample return, we're still discussing whether or not that is on the list, given that an Artemis science definition team recently put in a report, and that the Artemis landing sites are under discussion. And we wanted to be very upfront about that caveat in South Pole Aiken Basin, because we want to hear from the community what they think about including that mission theme on the list, given that NASA plans on returning humans to the moon in this decade. Also a reminder, because I get a lot of questions on this, and unfortunately a lot of people misquote this. Remember that New Frontiers calls for any proposal to address a preponderance of the science objectives. It says this in part because there's a recognition that in some cases missions can't achieve every science objective that the decadal survey put forward. And in some cases, well, let's just leave it at that. So the AO actually defines preponderance as superiority number or influence. And this is a recognition that one could make the case that achieving one of the four objectives is a preponderance. It's a superiority in influence. I often get people misquote preponderance as we have to do a majority of the science objectives. That is not the case. That is superiority in number, but the definition we use is in number or influence. We leave it up to the proposer to make the case why 1 or 2 or 5 out of 6 is a preponderance. And then the review panel passes judgment on that argument. There has already been a lot of discussion, and I think Lori touched upon this a few minutes ago, what NASA's expectations are when it comes to preponderance. And I am completely in agreement with Lori that if NASA has an expectation, we need to communicate it beforehand to the proposers. If there's a mission with 5 science objectives and we expect any New Frontiers mission to address 4 of those 5, we should make that very clear. But in the absence of that, proposers should feel confident assuming that the argument they make will be considered on its own merits and without any preconsiderations. So that is something that we're going to try to address and that we'll discuss further at headquarters. Let's see, I don't really want to go through the specific science objectives here. We can come back to them if you have any questions or you want to discuss them. The one thing I will point out is that, as I already mentioned, we did go to CAPS as the keeper of the decadal survey and have them answer some specific questions about the mission theme list and its content. I think it will come as no surprise to this group that there are organizations and people out there who want to see changes to this list. that's fine. That's why we're asking for feedback. But in the interest of being completely honest with everybody, I've got to say that the bar for making changes to this list is pretty doggone high. So just giving NASA feedback saying, add my favorite mission, add my favorite destination, is not going to cut it. You're going to have to come with much more refined arguments than that. Because we took it upon ourselves to make an adjustment to this mission list for New Frontiers 4. And a large chunk of the community was not happy with that. That's one of the reasons that we went to CAPS this time for making adjustments to the list. So the window is still open for doing this. But again, I want to be very open. The bar is very high. I think it's very likely we would want to go back to CAPS before we make any further adjustments to this list based on community feedback. I think you all know CAPS needs quite a bit of time to turn around questions that you present to it. And one of the benefits of starting early is we do have that time, but we don't want it to drag on much longer. Let's see, cost cap, which I think is the other very popular conversational topic for New Frontiers 5. The community announcement that went out in October with the draft cost cap provided it as $900 million in FY22 money for Phase A to D. Standard 25% reserve on that. Phase E and Phase F are not included in that. And of course, we always encourage lower cost investigations and especially cost efficient operations. The big thing here is because I've gotten feedback from people, hey, that cost cap looks a little low. Okay, we're putting out there for discussion. There is a growing concern that when NASA made the decision to exclude the Phase E costs from the Discovery New Frontiers cost cap, while that had benefits, it also had repercussions. And one of those repercussions has been that the total mission cost has grown. The complexity and the duration of Phase E has grown as well, which feeds into that increased mission cost. So we would like to see options that encourage optimizing those Phase E issues, the duration, the complexity, the cost. We're not saying that we have answers, but we sure would like to hear any ideas that the community has, because this is something that we have to tackle. And personally, I would welcome any thoughts that the community has on this. Some other parameters for Step 2, we plan to select up to 3 proposals for the Step 2 mission concept study. We plan on providing $5 million, real year dollars, for each of those selections, which is an increase over what we've done in the past. Right now, we are considering providing the heat shield as the tech infusion. Tech infusion is where we take a NASA-developed technology that's pretty much ready to go for flight, and essentially just encourage its use on these mission proposals. We are in discussions with some organizations to add other items to that list, so you could see more items on this list when we talk about the final parameters in a couple months. Launch readiness date, simply doing the math for the schedule, means that our LRD is going to be in the 2031 to 2033 timeframe. Launch vehicle, we'll do launch vehicle the standard way we have in the past, and contributions, we'll do that the standard way we have in the past as well. Nuclear power sources, I think this will end up looking very similar to what we did for the current Discovery and for New Frontiers 4, but we will get the details on this as soon as we are confident in them ourselves. Those details being what kind of units we're talking about, what their performance characteristics are, how many are available, and what the cost will be to the proposer. But we will do this in a similar way in which we did it for Discovery and New Frontiers 4. And finally, student collaboration, science enhancement options, and tech demos. We're going to defer those to Step 2 as we have for the last few AOs. but we're going to make sure all of the rules and parameters are finalized and shared when the Step 1 AO is released. And we're doing this because we realize that proposers need to start thinking about this early. Even though we're not asking for the details until the end of Step 2, that's intended as a way to reduce the workload on the proposers. You don't have to sharpen the pencil to the point that you're comfortable sharing it with NASA at the end of Step 1. But we do realize that you can't wait until the beginning of Step 2 and then start thinking, hey, what kind of tech demo do we want to incorporate? So we want to give you the information you need at the beginning of Step 1 to begin working on that, even though we're not asking you to close the loop with NASA until the end of Step 2. And that's everything I have. So I'm happy to take any questions that you may have or discuss any ways that we can make your feedback more effective.
Thanks so much, Curt. So we have time for questions. We do have to have Rick Benzel on at 9:30 sharp. So we have about 15 minutes for questions or comments. So that was really, really great, Curt. That really gives us a lot of information. And SBAG will be caucusing among the steering committee and try to evaluate everything you said, and we'll have a response. Okay, so let's give people time to put in questions or comments or, Curt wants to open this up to the community. So, let us speak.
And one thing I'll mention while people are pondering what they want to ask, or if they dare ask it, I've been asked this before about diversity, because we do a lot of talking about diversity, and people are wondering how we're going to incorporate that into the next AO that we do. And I will tell you that we have people within SMD who are working on how we can incorporate our diversity goals into AOs beyond what we've done in the past. I expect and I hope that for New Frontiers 5, they will be to a point where we are able to include diversity as part of the evaluation that we do of these proposals. I do not have any specifics. I do not have any idea what that will look like. As I said, there's a small group of people at SMD working on this. It's very complicated. But the hope and the expectation is that we will be able to step up and stand behind the statements that we've been making about the importance and value of diversity by looking at, by evaluating proposals in this regard.
Paul Abel says, sorry if I missed it, but will there be any impact to the Venus mission proposal / selection if a Venus mission is selected in Discovery?
That is not a question that we put to CAPS, so they did not weigh in on that. So so that is something that we would have to decide on our own within NASA, and then decide, do we want to take that to CAPS to have them weigh in on it. I confess that I'm not fully briefed on what the Discovery mission has in this regard, so I can't really weigh in on any of the details.
Paul says, thanks.
I can't believe there are no more questions. Oh, here's one, okay.
Larry Nittler says, thanks, Curt. You mentioned high bar for adding targets to the New Frontiers 5 list, but what about modifying science objectives within current targets? Is there a process for making suggestions, and how would they be evaluated?
I would say the process would be for the community to provide feedback suggesting changes. But since we based those science objectives on what the decadal survey had to say, I personally would be strongly inclined to close the loop with CAPS and have them weigh in on that. I know that there is difficulty among the missions on the mission theme list in that the previous decadal survey described those science objectives to varying levels of detail, both in terms of content and number, which can cause difficulty when making selections. What I have shared with the other AGs, and I'll share with all of you as well, is I really hope that the community, via the decadal survey, makes it clear that this time around we need to have the decadal survey do a little bit of leveling on the science objectives for the New Frontiers mission list, so we don't get into another situation where one mission might have 8 science objectives, one mission might have 2, one mission might have 5, because even if you do a good job during the review and selection of calibrating for that, it does give a strong appearance that it's not a level playing field, and that's very unfortunate. So hopefully for New Frontiers 6 and beyond, the decadal survey will address this. For New Frontiers 5, if you're thinking about modifying the science objectives, perhaps because the science has advanced, or perhaps for other reasons, share that with NASA, and then we will consider whether or not the change is significant enough that we want CAPS to weigh in on it.
And he says thanks.
Okay, I'm going to give another minute or two for people to ask questions. I think we've got Rick on, so he can start early, and then we can add a little bit to the lunch break. But I do want to give people the opportunity. I can't believe there's more, Curt. You know, there's over 100 people, 110 people on this telecon. So I'm waiting for.
Well, and Bonnie, once you all caucus and your steering group discusses this a little bit more, if you all want to have another quick meeting just to bounce things off me, I'm perfectly open to that as well.
Yeah, I think we're going to, you know, because we did do, let me just comment that we did do a survey to our to the small bodies community, and wrote a white paper on this and gave it to the decadal. That's for the next decadal. This is a previous decadal, but just for information, the comet surface sample return was the #1 priority for New Frontiers mission. And the other 2 that came up were a Ceres lander. And I think the response that Tom gave to the question that we did have a finding and wanted to add this to the ocean worlds, but I think that the question really answered that we are still working on the past decadal, still following through, and that CAPS and then PAC, of course, would have to vet this idea and evaluate it. It would have to be on a decadal. It's not on the decadal. Okay, so that was the answer we got on that. And then the third thing that was a possibility for New Frontiers was an asteroid kind of tour, just go to the asteroid belt and tour a bunch of asteroids. So those are the ones that the community is discussing. I mean, fortunately, the top one is still the comet sample return. But, we should, we will be discussing those. We have, surveyed the community and done some groundwork on this, but, the final suggestion, we want to try to be careful about that. Okay, there is another one from Paul A. Bell. Can you tell us if there are any sensitivities to international contributions for New Frontiers 5? Not so much in terms of science per se, but perhaps technology equipment contributions.
No sensitivities, but I will point out that the AO has language saying, hey, contributions are great, but we review them to the same level of rigor as anything else. So you are perfectly welcome to have a technology or subsystem in your proposal that's TRL -4. And it doesn't matter who's providing that. It's going to get reviewed and dinged no matter who the provider is because it's TRL -4. Now, of course, what I always tell people is I don't care if you're TRL -4 as long as you have a whiz-bang plan of getting it to TRL 6 by PDR. And I'm a big believer in that. Unfortunately, in my experience, what proposers do is spend way more pages and text trying to convince everybody that this is already a TRL 42. When personally, I think what they should do is spend all of that effort convincing the review panel that they have a whiz-bang plan of getting it to TRL 6 by PDR. That's just my personal belief.
And he gives a thank you.
And Paul, I will tell you that if we do come up with any sensitivities, any certain pieces of equipment or tech that we don't want to see as non-US contributions, then the AO would stipulate that.